Hello and welcome to another episode of Builders. I'm your host Lee, and today we have a special guest with us, Manouk Draisma. Manouk brings over a decade of experience in commercial roles within the B2B software and fintech industry. She's known for her proven track record in building and leading high-performing teams and her passion for customer success and partnerships. Currently, Manouk is making waves in as the co-founder of LangWatch, a company dedicated to providing AI solutions essential for businesses of all sizes. LangWatch offers all-in-one tooling to improve and iterate on current models, AI models, while mitigating risks such as data leakage, jailbreaking, and hallucinations. We're thrilled to have Manouk with us today to share her insights and experiences. Welcome to the show, Manouk. How's it going?
Thanks. Excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Lovely to have you here as well. Let me start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your journey in the B2B software and fintech industry over the past decade.
Decade sounds so long, eh? So long
right,
ago.
It does, yeah.
Well, initially I started at a startup, which was completely at that time focusing on the e-commerce market. It was in 2012 when everything was just booming around e-commerce. Every retailer wanted to do something with e-commerce. It was a very small startup at the time when I joined. That was the beginning.
What was the company?
SEO Shop. It was in Europe quite a big market player. It's similar to Shopify at this time in the world, but at that time it was a startup there. Literally joining the team as a junior account manager. Never done sales in my life before, but then got rolling and that took off super well. And then the acquisition came from Lightspeed, which was a Canadian-based company, and then the journey began and scale up to IPO in the end of the day. So yeah, pretty exciting journey at that time.
Fantastic, yeah. Lightspeed, they, correct me if I'm wrong, but they announced an IPO some years back, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I entirely got the journey from startup being acquired.
Fantastic.
IPO, and then after IPO during and before, a lot of acquisitions from other companies also came along. So a lot of different, especially in Europe, a lot of different countries like Switzerland, France, Germany, all acquisitions from different solutions out there. So a lot of team expansions.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Must have been some experience. And what were some of the biggest challenges you faced? You were leading teams in these companies, right? At Lightspeed as well. What were some of the bigger challenges? How did you overcome them?
Yeah, correct. I think during acquisition time, as in not the acquisition of the company when we were acquired, I think then all becomes a little bit more professional and moving from your own CRM to Salesforce, and that's only growth, I would say. But the moment you're going to acquire other companies and convince them also, hey, we're having a way of working and this is how we're going to do it, that brought by with like certain companies more challenges than other companies, but it always has been a very learning-full way of different cultures, different ways of working, etc.
And yeah, you mentioned kind of this the startups going into scale-ups and then even into kind of enterprise organizations. It's quite a kind of broad experience. How have you observed leading teams in those different types of organizations, essentially? How does it kind of differ from a startup, for example, to an enterprise?
Yeah, good question. I think at the beginning it's all just rolling, right? Everyone wants to sprint for that certain milestone, hit their targets, double, triple, whatever. And they're so committed, myself as well, but so committed towards the company as a startup. It's all one family. And I believe that took on for quite some time, even after IPO. There's a sudden moment that you're going to need to hire people to do certain jobs, and they're less maybe family or like feeling that urge from the beginning on.
Right.
So that's a different way of thinking, but also I think very important, right? As in there's a certain shift when you're in growing phases and where there's more a work-life balance needed. And I think that the moment I left was right after, like a year after COVID, I believe. And that was that year before was quite a work-life balance period, which you needed to overcome and handle in a different way with leading teams.
Right, I see. And yeah, what were the specific roles that you were in when you were leading these teams? Just out of curiosity.
I started at sales, just BD roles, and it was a super tiny, small team lead. Was just my first experience as doing one-on-ones, the first team meetings, getting people motivated, and just learning the way. Then I moved to more customer support, so more the technical side of it. I wanted to, I don't know why exactly anymore. I wanted to become more technical and doing a little bit of coding, and that's why I moved to the technical support team at that time. Okay. And then suddenly the team grew from like 7 people to 30 people in a year, in 1.5 years, and then suddenly it becomes quite a big team, right? Then it also becomes a little bit different, and managing salespeople versus support people is also very, very much a difference. And coming back to your question.
Yeah, no, I was asking about the roles in the different companies, so as then, like leader support, of these teams.
Exactly. Yeah. So and then I missed a little bit the part of closing a deal, moved over to support, but there was no one really taking care of it. So that's the moment actually I started from scratch the customer success team. We're then responsible for taking on the customer from entirely the beginning to the end, and leading the way up there. And that at that time it was a big team. I missed a little bit the touch with customers or partners. So I spoke with that, or out in the open over that. And at that moment, the VP partnerships of Lightspeed at the time said, hey, why not join the partnerships team, where you have a smaller and tinier team, but you can build on enterprise sales and work along that way.
Fantastic. And could you share any tips on how to, like, these are kind of fast-paced, ever-evolving environments that you've been working in, where you're
it's you go 8 years long, right?
Yeah, and you're going from like 7 to 30, like you were saying, just in like a department. How do you kind of stay motivated, like, and kind of focus? How do you inspire the team that you're leading?
Always being part of the team, as in, it's also showing, this is something we do together, and but having that, I've always had that inspiration, like kind of feeling almost indoctrinated with a certain product or a company, and then showing that, as in, this is what we're gonna do, right? This is amazing. This is this is gonna be the company you want to work for. And in the end of the day, it indeed showed the right success. So
you're in it together. So that collaboration.
Exactly.
Oh, nice. And you mentioned that you left. What was it? Left Lightspeed a year after COVID, or when was it that you?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
1.5 years after. Yeah.
And that, just makes me think about like this, the growing trend towards remote work, or kind of, a lot of companies being hybrid now post COVID, particularly in the tech industry, of course. How do you think this has affected team dynamics, productivity? We're going to talk in more detail about LangWatch at the moment. I don't know what your setup is there, if you're 100% remote or whatever, but how do you think like this kind of growing trend in the tech industry has affected, like I said, team dynamics and productivity?
I think maybe to turn it back, at that moment, it was one, like at Lightspeed, it was super like hard, right? All the retail and restaurant shops closed, and everyone needed to hit this target, and everyone was so like on their own. And like that took a while until you kind of get used to it, and people are getting more opportunity. Like now it's almost common to do it hybrid. I do believe in a startup phase, like we are at the moment, it's very important to sit almost next to each other. Hey, I just had a call with a customer. Can we look into this? Or hey, this is like sitting next to your tech team, the ones who are building, the ones who are actually building the solutions. I think that's super important, at least in the phase we are at the moment. For startup vibes, but also I'm the only one who's doing commercial at the moment. But also your first hires in sales, in commercial roles, I do believe they need to sit next to you, listening to what you're saying, how you convince them. I think that's also how I learned the job in the end, right? I remember that we were sitting at like we called it like the almost the battery was just one table full of salespeople.
Right.
And at a
Learning
certain
from each
moment,
other, bouncing off each
exactly.
other. Yeah.
You hear people repeating the same sentences or repeating the same closing last sentence. And all those sentences are still in your head somewhere, somehow. And obviously with a new product selling that changes. But I think it's very important to have that dynamic together.
Yeah. No, I can hear what you're saying. That kind of proximity is, I think, for me as well, it's really, really helpful, particularly in the kind of very early phase of a company in startups. But I think it's exciting as well to see the amount of technology coming out that can, I'm not saying substitute per se, maybe not yet, but is kind of imitating that feel of like how close you are or like working in the same environment. So I'm personally quite excited to see how it evolves. Yeah. So like being remote, but feeling like you're in the same meeting or whatever it might be.
Yeah, true. And it helps a lot. I mean, that's for sure. Although I like to be surrounded by people, and also like we're now in a co-working space, a lot of different startups all doing something with AI. So all in some sort of the same period of raising money or not raising money or having the same challenge. And I think that's super good to be surrounded with.
Right, that networking effect as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And in addition to then, what Lightspeed and what became Lightspeed, you were working at a previous company called Biller.ai, I believe, right? What were you doing there? This was some AI-powered payment solution, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was a buy now, pay later solution for the B2B. And mainly e-commerce businesses. As I started my career in e-commerce as Yoshi of Lightspeed, I really believe that, or I still believe actually, that there was a high demand or a high growing opportunity for B2B e-commerce businesses. So I really saw the opportunity of that buy now, pay later, such as Klarna, but then for the B2B sector. Why? Because all businesses are used to pay on invoice and pay afterwards, right? But then still doing that with invoices, paying 30 days, 60 days later, or 90 days, and having that more automated. So I started there as well. Was within a year, we grew from 7 to 75 people, I believe.
Oh, wow.
If I remember correctly. But then the road, then it took another way, and I think 90% of the team was laid off at that time.
Okay.
So that's almost 1.5 years ago, I think. So that was a very short story. Also a roller coaster, but a different roller coaster. A roller coaster which only happened for a year and not 8 years. Where I was responsible for at that time was leading the head of customer success and operations. So that means everything setting up from scratch. There wasn't something existing yet, from onboarding, integration, support, AML, KYC processes, as well as when we had the first customers coming in, making sure they kept staying via customer success opportunities.
Fantastic. And then, so that was for around a year, and up until you then co-founded LangWatch, is that right?
That's then that was last year, March, April, when that ended completely.
Right.
Then I thought, hey, now I've seen two amazing experiences, right? One startup which went IPO, and one startup which, grew immensely, but then also ended perhaps differently, did end differently. Now it's time to start my own venture, and I've always had the willingness to create something, build something from zero, from scratch. I love doing that with teams, but now also with a product which actually people are using. I think that's the most exciting thing about it. So actually at that moment I started a program at Antler, which is a venture capital program with a lot of founders aspirational to find your own company. So I joined the program, got into it, found a co-founder that didn't really work out well. Then Antler said, we still want to invest in you as long as you find your perfect CTO or your perfect fit, right? I'm the non-technical person, so I needed to find a CTO next to me. I wanted to do that. So actually, after a introduction from one of an earlier colleague at Biller, he said, "Hey, I know someone, and he would be amazing. And you've met him actually a couple of times over a couple of drinks." And I said, "Oh yes, that would be amazing, right?" So we got to work together. I actually worked with 3-4 potential CTOs in a period of 2 months to find out, hey, what do I really want? What do I really need? And how can we build that connection of being co-founders together, learning from each other, challenging each other, setting deadlines, and making sure that we keep them. So that went super well. And then Rogerio decided to quit his job at Booking.com. At the time, he was engineering manager.
What did you say his name was, sorry?
Rogerio.
Rogerio, yeah, sorry. Okay, so yeah, he came over from Booking.com as your co-founder and CTO then.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, nice. And so you'd gone to this program, Entelo, as you said, and you had this idea, LangWatch then, which they found really, really exciting and wanted to invest in. And then it was a matter of finding Rogerio, who then came along. And when was LangWatch officially founded? Not that long ago?
Not that long ago. It's only January when we completely were on board and full-time, the two of us.
Fantastic.
That's
exciting.
A short time.
So you're in that very, very early phase, as we were talking about earlier. Really exciting one as well. So I mean, let's go into LangWatch a little bit more. So as I mentioned in the introduction, there, it's a platform designed to help businesses manage and optimize their AI solutions, right? So you kind of founded it presumably to address whatever critical issues in AI deployment for companies. Is that right?
Yeah, but I will tell a little bit more about it. In a bit.
Please, just tell us. What inspired you? What inspired you and your co-founder?
Well, it's not that I started with LangWatch like when doing the program at Entler. I actually had a bunch of ideas, but in the end, what does work and but always my like a big problem I found, or a big issue I found, is that a lot of my friends were working at enterprise companies and they weren't allowed to use any AI tools, and I was like, why not? What as in, of course I understood they weren't allowed or something exactly. So how can we make that simpler? So that's actually where I started off with the problem, as in how can it be more safe to use, de-risking those AI risks. But in the meantime, during finding Rogerio's the perfect fit, I also explored and started to build a solution together with another friend of mine, and that is an AI wine recommender app for restaurants.
Okay.
It was super nice, or it's super nice to work on that, and got to experience how users were using it in restaurants and such. But also, it was very difficult to understand how users were actually using it, and when came out some rubbish answer and it didn't work well, how to solve that. And at that time, I was literally sending screenshots over WhatsApp or Slack, hey, we need to improve that or this or etc. So that was actually the moment where an entire different point of view on the solution came up. Instead of not only focusing on the safety aspect, also, hey, how can we evaluate the quality and not only the safety?
Right.
And then iterate through.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So you essentially had this idea, this kind of AI wine recommender, let's say, that was
sommelier, whatever.
Yeah, right. AI sommelier, exactly. So this was basically kind of facing these challenges that LangWatch is trying to address, essentially, where you had the not just security, but also kind of accuracy or relevancy of the response, basically.
Exactly.
And that gave you the idea for LangWatch.
Yeah, and together, Rogerio also saw the same problems happening at Booking.com, where they implemented the travel AI agent. And when a potential hallucination, so incorrect or false outcome came out of it, the customer service agent was literally sending a link to the product team, and they created a Jira ticket and they needed to solve it. So it was like a very reactive way of monitoring, or not even monitoring. So combining all those thoughts and all those problems together, that's basically how we came there.
Nice. And what's the core mission of LangWatch then? You've been alluding, I think, to things here, but what's the core mission?
Make sure that every company can build, iterate, and solutionize AI solutions confidently with safety and quality.
Nice. And I think, it's you mentioned you said the word hallucination there earlier as well. We hear so many people, I think, particularly nowadays, talking about ChatGPT as the kind of main example here, being how amazing it is, but beware, it's hallucinations, right? Some of these hallucinations, they're rather subtle, right? It's
Could
for
be, yeah.
like a human mind, like my own at least. It can be quite easy to miss, or maybe people trust too much. How does LangWatch help address these? How does it kind of work with hallucinations?
It has also. I don't think we don't have one evaluator or score as in this
Right.
thing is hallucinating, but it's getting a lot of different factors and a lot of different scores on indeed what you mentioned, relevancy in how much is the answer relevant towards the input being provided,
Yep.
with all the context in your application, and so all the documents companies, for example, have and are using in their LLMs. Is that coming back, and how many times is it coming back? And that's providing us a certain score for it. Yeah. I never heard about hallucination before 1.5 years back. So
Right.
right.
No, I think same for a lot of people as well. So you return a score essentially on how kind of accurate or relevant is this response, taking into account the kind of the prompt or the question.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
On all the messages, output, input, etc. We give companies and AI builders, product managers, the ability to evaluate what's happening, what the product performance of that is, and giving a certain score on it.
Fantastic. And in addition to hallucination as one aspect here, your company's safety checks and guardrails, if we call them that as well, they prevent these other common AI issues such as jailbreaking. I think we've seen, and exposure of this kind of sensitive data, in addition to these kind of off-topic conversations, for example. For context, because I've seen a little bit, on your website as well, like jailbreaking, the term specifically. For those not in the know, potentially, what is jailbreaking?
Yeah. It's actually where I started off my journey at Antler with prompt injection, and then you have indirect and direct prompt injection. And that's basically when a user tries to manipulate the AI bot to try to get answers they shouldn't be getting.
Okay.
I think some examples have been shown over the news over the past couple of months. One is from, for example, Chevrolet, who built a custom GPT bot on their website, and then someone was instructing the way how previously works at software was developed with software development is all done with code, right? Coding.
Yeah.
The LLMs listen to system prompts, listen to actual language. So then it's very hard to understand when a user talks in natural language, whether that's an actual user or developer, instructing the LLM to behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I think that the one I just mentioned from Chevrolet GPT was that the user was telling the bot, hey, from now on, you're going to listen to what I'm saying and instructing, and in a way that everything is legally binding. And then he bought a car for $1, I believe, something like that.
So they've essentially hacked the system, bypassed these ethical or these kind of safeguards to elicit prohibited information.
Yeah, and talking about hacking, I think what I'm afraid of is that, I think what we should be afraid of is that in the past, and I remember that so well while working in the technical support department, we were always afraid of DDoS. How do you say that in English? Attacks for the software, but that can actually happen with a AI solution which is out in the open to users as well, and sending a lot of messages and making it happen that your costs are going to raise like crazy.
And we also mentioned the kind of issue of data leakage or exposure, right? How does LangWatch work with this aspect? How does it address this concern? I can imagine this is a significant concern for, well, it is for all of us, and so for all of your customers and prospective customers, right? How does LangWatch work with this?
Yeah, I think the biggest ask or the biggest concern is personal information, and that's something we do detect. We can guardrail that, so we can actually stop that when someone is trying to put in his credit card details. Then we can say, "Hey, don't do that. Stop and do something else." Then it's completely removed and not stored in any database or such. That's happening. I think the other big one is business sensitive information, and that's a business case we need to evaluate per business, because that's so typical,
Right.
and that's so to evaluate those type of things. It's a different way of evaluating that, and it's super specified per business.
Right. And talking about these businesses, you're in the kind of a very early phase at the moment. But what kind of businesses are you going after? I said in the intro as well that you're kind of fitting all business sizes. But do you have a kind of your kind of go-to market, and who are you looking for?
Yeah. We're at the really beginning, right? As in not only our company, but also in terms of AI, and everyone is speaking about it. But in the end of the day, putting things in actual production is a different ballgame. What we're focusing on right now is mid-market area, where they're not only experimenting with AI, but actually putting things in production. What we see is that they first putting things in production internally to try it out with 50 users and then 50 first employees, and then move on. But for moving that product to a higher level, better quality and everything else, you need to have input, right? So you need to have data and usage.
Right.
So with our solution, you can actually see what's happening, what the product performance is, what the quality is, and perhaps also seeing like where they all were afraid of is perhaps not even happening, for example. And then feeling more confident about, hey, I can open this up to a wider audience internally and essentially also externally. So that's mid-markets. I do see, since I'm coming from the e-commerce space, that a lot of e-commerce full service agencies are kind of, who always build websites, web shops, kind of moving into the direction, hey, let's now build LLM-powered apps. So that's typically they want to build the most creative solutions out there, but don't want to focus much on monitoring quality control. Let's say.
Right. No, I see. Yeah, I was going to mention. I can imagine kind of an e-commerce is a good example here. So, like, AI powered chatbots, for example, could handling customer inquiries and supports. Right. Yeah, exactly. Recommendation. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about it. It's super interesting to kind of, I think, I'm thinking of our kind of service as well. If we had these kind of chatbots on our website that were kind of producing or providing these inaccurate or irrelevant responses that lead to, potential loss of sales and everything, is a massive opportunity here, right?
Both ways. So to implement it, one, yes, that's a big opportunity, but having the right thing there, that's what's needed.
Are there any recent or I can imagine ongoing kind of projects at your company that you're really excited about that you can share with us?
I think just popping up in my mind because you said e-commerce. I think one example which is pretty cool is an AI recommendation tool, indeed, for on website to advise about, hey, based on who you are, the questions being asked, and like the actual conversations happening in the chat, there's a certain recommendation on certain products happening. Then one, it's kind of in the not completely medical space, but a little bit. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be faithful and the responses. So all the information they have that in their documents, in their systems, it needs to be correct as well. And then lastly, they also want to understand if what they built and invested into their AI solution, if the return on investment is actually happening. So what we provide back is that based on the recommendation have been provided, we can actually also show if that actual product has been bought afterwards. So getting that conversion metric back. There's only one
Exactly.
event for this specific example, but we basically can do that with any event happening in our analytics product.
Fantastic. And any specific or particular success stories from customers, maybe related to these e-commerce examples that you were talking about?
Other than this,
yeah.
I think that's a good example. In all honesty, I think most are still experimenting. So internally, proof of concept phase. I think one other cool solution is also to understand, like, and it's not even to do yet with safety, but it's more like giving them confidence that it's safe and that the bot is not suddenly talking about ordering pizza. So that's the off-topic detector you just mentioned, right? You don't want your users to spend your credits on that part.
Exactly.
That didn't happen yet, but it's more like the preventing part. We work with CS AI powered platforms, basically a customer service platform we all know, but then with Gen AI native in their product. So what we are not only doing with like the evaluation part, showing what the actual quality of the output is and iterating and fine tuning it, but also giving insights in, hey, did that message escalated? What was the tone of voice of that message? Seeing the actual user flow along the way as well. Right. So they can dive deeper into that conversation and see where the user dropped, for example, in the conversation itself.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, like you were talking about, that getting that feedback at the end is essentially you're trying to prevent certain things, but also kind of ensure quality, but you're also sending data back in terms of ultimate impact, right, of using.
It's really a combination of having the LLM as a judge, so the LLM monitoring the quality of it, as well as getting the actual user feedback, not in a written way, as in, hey, thumbs up, thumbs down, that as well, but also in a more like sentiment way. Where did it drop? How many messages did they need to send until you got the right answer, and how did that happen? So that the entire user analytics is coming back into your solution as well.
Fantastic. And is this kind of user and business analytics, is this like typically a dashboard provided by you guys, or is it data fed into the company's kind of own or native environment?
It's on our platform. We build it, but it's fully API based, so we can implement it in any solution to present to their customers as well.
Right.
I think that's the use case behind that.
And because we're talking a lot about safety and security matters here, like there's a lot of talk around kind of AI ethics, right? Currently, what are your thoughts on like the current state of AI ethics? Where like how should companies approach these considerations in AI development, basically?
It is some sort of like in my head a dream to kind of detect the best possible biased outcome, or like the worst scenarios, and make sure that you can improve based on that. In the end of the day, we're all biased as human as well. So should we be that concerned about it, or can we take it and learn from it, but also improve it on? I think that's the most important part of it, right?
No, I think and it's also the kind of the end goal of the user as well. I think particularly when it comes to manipulation of certain systems and everything. I think I was reading some kind of surveys and articles where it's no surprise that a lot of businesses mention the fact that privacy and security and reliability, which is what your company is working with here, they're the kind of top AI related concerns for companies, I think, worldwide, right? And there are growing concerns naturally for like about the ethical deployment of AI technologies and these kind of robust guidelines and frameworks, whatever you want to call them, being absolutely necessary. How do you kind of see this playing out in the future, moving forward? What do you kind of have planned at LangWatch in terms of kind of features and whatnot? Maybe you don't want to share any secrets or anything here, but are there things kind of that you have in the pipeline that you can talk about related to these aspects?
Well, what we really believe we need to be good at and continuously improve is having those quality assurance or those quality evaluations really, really well. That's like top priority. And we're not the company that will be how to say the researching part of it, and then we both currently have an evaluations built from based on the findings we found with our pilot customers, and okay, this is a really neat and this is how we can help you with that. But on the other side also, it's a platform, a library where we integrate all type of certain open source evaluators into our platform as well. And I think it's such a moment in time at this moment that growing, uplifting, everyone is learning, all companies, AI research and such that we need to combine those efforts and get the best solutions out there.
Can you find it tough to kind of keep on top of trends and kind of everything that's happening?
Yeah.
There's so much happening and so fast.
Need to have
right?
a timer on my LinkedIn because otherwise you're gonna drown in new things happening and such. Yeah, really need to stop yourself sometimes.
Yeah, and you were talking about work-life balance before. How is it now? You guys are kind of 6 months in.
It's
work.
It's work. But it's still. I mean, I love it, and I love what I'm doing at the moment, and I don't think there will be any job which I wouldn't like go for the 100,000% of my time. I talked about it with my friends over the weekend, and sometimes I can shown a little bit like I'm completely over it and only talking about it, but also feel a little bit stressed. Like, I mean, that's normal.
Right.
But then they also said, Manouk, it doesn't really matter, even if you're gonna ice scoop. No, that was a joke. But you will always take that for the 100%.
If you're not working, you're talking about work, right? So.
And thinking and dreaming and dreaming not so much, but
yeah. But tell us a little bit about the kind of the makeup or the composition of LangWatch at the moment. Yourself, your co-founder that you've been talking about. Who else is working at LangWatch at the moment?
Yeah, we started with the two of us, indeed, and then we hired an amazing founding engineer. He was one of the first employees at Yoko, a payments fintech company as well. Completely full stack, know everything, but really hard working team at the moment. So we're with four and a half. Can you say that, like part-timers as half developers? And so for me, I'm responsible for everything but that. Let's phrase it like that. So commercial, financial operations.
Yep.
Investors, and with that, I have the help of two work students to get things rolling, and that.
Fantastic.
So getting a team there,
nice, exciting. No, very, very exciting. What plans do you have in terms of in growth? You're talking a little bit about the commercial side, but also investment. Are there kind of plans afoot? Are you kind of still figuring things out, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at this moment, like in terms of financial, we're good and we're going strong, and the traction for the past 5 months have been crazy. From launching the product in like an MVP status to converting our first pilot customers to paid customers, and launching the product as well. That and the growth will only continue, hopefully, in that, and then. Obviously, that comes with some new investments as well. I think by the end of this year.
Exciting, and this is a subscription based model for your clients, right?
Yeah, it's indeed a subscription based model, and partly also usage based. So a combination of the two.
Got you. Yeah. And what markets are you focusing on at the moment? You're obviously in Europe, down in the Netherlands, right?
Correct. But we do see traction from the Netherlands, Germany, UK, and also some trials happening at the moment with companies in Canada and the US. So quite spread around there. It's in the end of the day, it's a developer tool right now, and although we're focusing on combining that's me as a non-technical person can also collaborate with Rogerio as a technical person in the same platform to set it up. And the real pain point at the beginning is that part of the AI builders building the solutions and making sure it's reliable and sensitive. So that's where it starts, and they speak the same language, and the countries in that matter doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you guys, you said you were based at co-working space, right? So you guys, you have that close proximity to each other at the moment, at least, right? So you're
Correct,
working
indeed.
from the same space.
Working from the same space, sitting next to each other, with a couple of other startups surrounded by us as well.
And yeah, in your role at LangWatch, as co-founder, kind of donning many hats on everything else apart from like the technical side, as you said, what have you been able to take with you, would you say, from your previous experiences that you're leaning on that the experience that you gained now? Anything you can think of?
I wanted to say we're both in this go big or go home, because I think that's essentially also a little bit what the market is into, or at least we like doubling down and those sales efforts. I think from the experience at Lightspeed, it was a very American-driven sales organization,
right,
which I love, and I wouldn't choose or find a different way of working in that respect. It's all about the sales aspect and the customer behind that. So that has been a very big learning growth path. And essentially, when you are at that company, you don't think about it that way. But the moment you're gonna move on and move to the next, oh wow, it was really a big thing we learned there. So that's one. That's more about the commercial side of things. And then the second one, I said go big or go home, but on the other hand, keep something on that financial aspect as well. And I think we need to be acting way more healthier than perhaps some companies did over the past couple of years.
Yeah. No, I like. I think it's interesting what you mentioned about that kind of American culture, with that kind of it's full on kind of speed. You have the kind of the goal or the kind of end goal, and everyone's working in that direction. Even if they might kind of pivot or go in a different direction, it's still kind of full speed, kind of gung ho. So you like these kind of fast paced environments, right? Where there's lots happening essentially.
Love it, but it's also that every day is different. A new model pops up, a new product, or everything is new, and that's also what I'd love to absorb and what I'd love to share with people in the team when hiring new people, and not only now but also back in the days at SEO Shop when it was an e-commerce company. All those things were new, right? So it was very high velocity kind of way of working, and I love it when you really believe in the product and can really believe that this is going to be it. And that's also a little bit like the American way of selling sometimes, as in like, just do it.
And talking about really believing in the, in the product, like this kind of vision might be a hard question because you're kind of early on, but let's say, where do you see LangWatch in 5 years' time? I know the kind of in the AI space that you're in, there's so much that's happening all the time, but let's just say 5 years down the line, have you thought that far ahead?
I find it already hard to
might be wrong to think so far ahead, but let's say let's say 2 years, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
What I just said, right? We're so early on, and also companies are still figuring out what they need, what they want, I want to do something with it, but what should I do? Okay, first find out the problem, right? As in the use case, and then continuing to move on. But I find it's very hard to answer the 5-year question, so to say.
Yeah. But then let me try and rephrase it slightly. Let's say, how do you see the role of let's say AI evolving in like the B2B software industries over the coming years. Not just like we've been talking about problems such as safety and security,
Yeah, but
accuracy
more in
of
a solution
answers.
way, you mean?
Yeah, or just yeah, in a solution way, but
Yeah.
also kind of generally, how do you see it kind of
Yeah.
evolving?
In the end of the day, I believe, and some people agree, some people disagree, right? As in, it's gonna be 100% part of every single business. And I was actually surprised that it's not like only the mid market and enterprise and startups figuring this out, but also like governmentals, like smaller companies, even like construction companies. Look, smaller construction companies are going side by side by door by door and need to write their summaries of their conversations and directly putting an offer out there. Those type of things are really like things which can be made easier there as well. And I think, yeah, in the end of the day, it's going to be every single business will be an AI company, or at least will be
Will need to be
working with it.
in some way, right? In some shape or form, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. That being said, I just read a sad line of what was it, sentence in the newspaper over the weekend that someone said, "I want AI to automate my washing, like purpose dishwashing
Yeah.
things, and so that I can spend my time on working on design and art and not the other way around." And then I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I actually sort of say, well, I'm not sure if it was in our kind of internal, Slack channel that someone here
Yeah.
at the company shared it. It was funny, but yeah, at the same time, like you said, a little bit sad. I mean,
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
As in
Yeah,
so
for
much
sure.
opportunity and so much things to happen still, but that was a little bit like,
Yeah.
that's right.
Almost too much opportunity in that sense. But
Yeah.
no, both exciting.
Yeah, the revolution is happening, that's for sure.
Yeah. We're living through it. But what I think, just starting to kind of wrap up a little bit here. I'd be interested also to kind of get some. What would your advice be to kind of aspiring entrepreneurs or anyone looking to enter the AI solutions market?
Just do it, continue with it. Don't let you stop. But as well, and okay, I find it hard to say because don't look, for example, at the competition or competitors, or
Right.
if you feel the traction, if you feel that it's like and know and show that it's been bought and everything else, I think go for it. But it's more in an entrepreneurial way, not on AI specifically, perhaps. And I had one thing in mind I wanted to say.
Anything more kind of AI solutions market specific?
Oh, yeah, everything which can be automated rather than indeed the that's I think the focus on. I do see a lot of AI agencies popping up everywhere, consultancy and advising everyone and every now and then. But first go to the problem and finding out, okay, what can actually be automated, or what is actually a pain point you can solve for that company, instead of just doing something with AI because it's AI.
Exactly. No, very good. Is there anything you'd like to kind of add before I wrap up? Any news you'd want to kind of share about LangWatch moving forward, or anything?
Ooh, news. There's a very cool framework out there, which is from some guys from Stanford. It's the DSPY framework. It's literally
Say it
the
again,
tech team
could you?
here.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, DSPY. It's called. And basically, it's to improve your models and your AI solution. And with the tech team within our team, they tried to test it with prompt engineering manually, and they couldn't get higher than 60%. And with that solution, they could go over 80% of the improvement of the models. And what we did is, based on that framework, we put in a visualizer on it. So actually, to get insights into the overall performance and the analytics, to show that all the way from how it is now versus or how it was last
Before.
week versus exactly. So it's a very good solution, or a very cool feature which just has been released yesterday.
Exciting.
Which I recommend people to look into and find out how they can use it for their use case. Very use case specific, what works and what doesn't work. So would definitely recommend to look at it. Other than
just
that,
just to repeat it for the listeners, that was a DSPY, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. What does it stand for?
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No. No, I think that's it. Thanks so much for having me, and hope it has been a good, exciting story, and that it was learningful in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think thank you so much for sharing valuable insights, your experiences with us today. I think it was fascinating to hear. Particularly the work going on at LangWatch. You're kind of early in the journey, but I'm so really excited for you.
Thanks so much. So much learnings and so much excitement going on. So
yeah. I'll be keeping a close eye. But thank you so much, Manouk, for joining us. And that wraps up another episode here on the Builders podcast. To our listeners, we hope also that you found this episode as inspiring, as informative as we did. Please don't forget to subscribe to Builders for more conversations with industry leaders and with innovators. So until next time, keep on innovating and keep on building. Ciao.